Digloid.com. This video is going to discuss diffraction using one of my pages in my Digloid medium format publications. It's got a huge amount of stuff in it. Scrolling there for many years, many brands. Anyway, that's something you might want to subscribe to over at Digloid.com. So diffraction is not a well understood concept, I find. I keep trying to explain it in print, you know, like with a page like this, and I find that people really have some trouble with it. Maybe that's my fault for not explaining it very well. So I'm going to try to explain it in this video. Essentially what diffraction is, well, why do you care about diffraction? Well, because it can pretty much trash your images. On modern high-resolution cameras, by f8, it's already having a substantial impact, and by f11, it is just stomping all over the sharpness and micro contrast and eliminating all brilliance. So I strictly avoid f11 on my Fujifilm GFX 100S, Sony a7R5, and so on. So let's take a look at maybe not that interesting subject, but one that gives us a good way to look at it. First of all, f5.6 is always good on any of the current cameras we have, but as maybe we can see here, I'm going to pull this up and I'm going to zoom in just for video purposes. What we're looking at here at 5.6 is it's blurry up in this area because there's not enough depth of field. It's sort of sharp down here, but the lens isn't that great, so it's not really at full sharpness, and it's also focused right at the front here. So if we go to f8, what happens? Well, this stuff all gets sharper, and you notice up higher, go towards the top, towards the chimney there, we pick up better sharpness. That's depth of field. So 5.6 to 8 for this scene is a huge improvement because of poor lens performance along with depth of field. f8 is just a must-have here. Unless you're doing focus stacking. And then you go to f11, and what happens? Well, you pick up more depth of field towards the top there. I'll flick 8, 11, 8, 11. But look what happens at the bottom. The bottom, I hope you can see this in the video, actually becomes quite a bit softer. The fine detail is being whacked. Now, if we go to f16, that'll become more obvious. Even the video should show you that f16 versus f11 is blurry in a major way. So let's do this A-B comparison here, and let's compare f5.6 to f16. Toggle that. So 5.6, we have no depth of field at the top, but at least it's reasonably sharp. Let's do f8. You can see that it's nice and sharp here. It's falling short on depth of field, but it generally looks good within the limits of depth of field. Let's toggle it to f16. What happens? Oh, well, all the bottom area, which looked nice and sharp, is now real. It almost looks as unsharp as that out of focus stuff at the top. And just to exaggerate things, let's use f22, which is a complete disaster. f8 versus f22. You can see that even at the bottom, everything's been smeared. There's no fine detail left. We're now at like a 30 megapixel camera off our 100 megapixel sensor. So f22 is terrible. f32 is a complete disaster. We've now reduced our 100 megapixel sensor to something like, I don't know, 15 megapixels. So shooting at f32 is terrible. Shooting at f22 is terrible. Shooting at f16 is terrible. Shooting at f11 is a major compromise. Unless you really have to have the depth of field, you pretty much don't want to go past f8 to f9 with something like the Fujifilm 100S or the Sony a7R5. So that's a visual demonstration of it. And let's just look at another example. Let's see here on a crop. That's the best one here. Let's pull this guy up. You can see at f5.6, the leading edge of the ruler lacks sharpness because of the depth of field. When I go to f8, it got a little better, but not great. f11, a little better, not great. When you yank it over to 32, you can see it just goes into a smeared mush. 22 is a smeared mush. 16's, it's really, look at those leaves. They've gone totally soft. So Doesn't matter where you look. It doesn't matter which lens you're using. These effects always apply. And if you're using any camera, like a 60 megapixel Sony or a 100 megapixel Fujifilm, they both have the same size pixels, 3.76 microns. That's incredibly tiny. And the issue is that diffraction is a smearing. You essentially get, it's like dropping a stone into a pond. There's a big splash in the middle, and then you get radiating rings out from that. That's essentially what's going on with light with diffraction. So as you stop down, the center gets duller, and you get brighter and brighter rings around it, and that's why the thing goes dull. Now you can compensate for this. There's something what I call diffraction mitigating sharpening, and that's discussed in one of my other publications, Digloid Making Sharp Images, and I show there what you can do to mitigate the diffraction. However, by f11, you're never going to get back what you had at f8. You really need to do a focus stacking, which I cover in great detail also on my website. And that's really your only solution for getting maximum sharpness near to far and without severely damaging the fine detail that you otherwise would do. So I hope that helped explain a little better. Oh, here's another crop here. Let's just take a look at this guy. So let's go to 100%. Let's zoom that in a little bit so it's easier to see. So here's 5.6, and you can see our frogs at the left over here are reasonably sharp. They're not optimal lens performance. When we go to f8, things definitely look better overall. Leading edge of the chair is still a little blurry. That's depth of field. Here's 5.6, 8. So we can see the depth of field is helping us. Well, not all that much. This isn't the best lens. f11 is giving us more depth of field, but you might notice those frogs from 8 to 11 are actually going dim and dull. The fine detail is being smeared. Watch those frogs at f16. Okay, now they're really soft. There's f32. There's basically nothing left of fine detail. It's all smeared. 22, a little comes back. 16, more comes back. f11. f11 is the last aperture. It looks like it actually has detail when it's actually pretty smeared compared to 5.6. 11, 8, 11, 8. If you watch that frog, 11, 8, you're really losing that fine detail with 11. Now, the better the lens you have, the worse this is going to be. So I'm not using the best lens here. It's the Fujifilm 35-70. Micro contrast isn't all that great. The better lenses that are going to even be more affected by this thing, something like the Fujifilm 55mm f1.7 is probably their best lens. And in a lens like that, when you start going to f11, it's not so hot. Let's just take a look at this guy here at 100%. There's f1.7, and you can see even at f1.7, there's no depth of field. It's sharp here, we're focused, and then it falls off from depth of field. You stop it down to 6.4 or so, and diffraction isn't a problem. 4 is probably the best, ignoring depth of field, but diffraction is not really a problem at 6.4. You've got strong sharpness, near to far now. But what happens when you go to f11? Well, there was a lighting change, but if you look at that wood grain from 6.4 to f11, that wood grain is really been softened. You can look at this leading aspen. So the only real solution to this is focus stacking. f9.11 here is f9 11 frames that was focus stacked, and it's unfortunately the lighting's a little different. Anyway, that's your only solution here, and there's just no. That's kind of just life. So pay attention to your aperture. And here's one more example. Maybe this one will be a little better. Here I've got some clayish soil out in the middle of the Utah desert. You can see at 1.7 it's a little soft, but very impressive for a 1.7. It's near its optimal at around 5.6, 4 to 5.6, and at f8 it's still good, but it's softened very noticeably compared to f5.6. That's your diffraction, And I didn't shoot it at f11. Well, actually, I did. The wind killed that shot. But f802 gives me all the sharpness of f8 with a two-frame focus stack. I got more depth of field. All right. Well, one more example here, I guess. Let's see. What about? Yeah, let's say it only goes through 7.1. Snow-crusted cliff. All right. This one we've got some diffraction action. Let's take a look at this guy. We got some fine detail in the snow. Sorry, 100%. So when I look here, the lens is not performing at its best at 5.6. This 35 to 70. So I go to f8. Things actually improve, which is kind of bad in a way because a lens ought to be at its best at 5.6, but the 35 to 70 zoom isn't. Anyway, so we go to f8. That's our best performance. f9, very similar. f11. Maybe you can see, let's do the AB, 35 to 70 at 8, and let's compare that to f11. So we just toggle that. That's f8, f11, f8, f11. You can see when you go to f11, this detail in the snow and everywhere else, it just goes very soft, and that is in spite of using much more aggressive sharpening. So you never can really get back your detail at f11 versus f8. So be aware of that. All right, that probably wraps it up for a kind of an ad hoc overview.